me start by getting wrap-up comments from each one of you.
I think the overall mood of this room is absolutely correct, which is you can't wait. Get in now. The market's big enough. Of course there are hurdles. Get in now, but then continue to work and continue to make changes. And make sure you hold the regulators accountable as well.
Maggie is it's one of the, I mentioned food security, that's clearly, we've seen it in taxation, we've seen it in digital, where the regulator has created the confusion that you were talking about and this difference between the states and federal. But, at the end of the day, that has to be straightened out because that inconsistency, I think, is quite damaging. Having said all that, if you gave anybody in this room the opportunity to double their size of their business in India, they would do it. So we would move from 50% to 100%, and I'd do it in a heartbeat.
Well, absolutely. So everyone's on the same side here. Let me start by getting wrap-up comments from you, Mr. Agarwal. The priorities that you would like the government to address as you up your investments in India, already 30 billion, what is going to be the next big target for you?
There is a live example that I have raised in Britain $30 billion in last 10 years and invested in infrastructure, manufacturing and the resource sector. So I have gone through the entire cycle. But, just to look at the magnitude of the situation, 1.5 billion people in India, in the Indian subcontinent, where we work. I work in Africa, 1.5 billion people in Africa, 1.5 billion people in China where we work. So all these three experience is tremendous. What left? What left? So this is a phenomenal opportunity for the UK company and the Britain to capture this opportunity for both. One is they're talking about the British SMEs to invest in India for sure, in technology. Also, the British company will be upfront to bring the investment and making that structure so whole world can use that structure to invest in India. That's how I look at it.
Okay. Rana Kapoor, the two suggestions that you'd like to leave on the table.
Number one has been made by Anil, but let me come to what I think is lacking. Britain has an outstanding network called the British Council, right? It's the single biggest investment which Britain has made in India, which in my judgment is grossly undertapped, right? Now, how do you bring, culture? How do you create more education impact and use this network? Because this is the biggest need of India today, education and really, in a way, catalyzing the culture in our country. And the number 2 point, which we shared yesterday briefly, is DICE, what I call design, innovation, creativity and entrepreneurship. I think UK has fantastic talent. Sri Martin Sorrell is
Sri Martin Sorrell.
He's the evangelist, as Anilji said, at the National Gallery. But to come to the point that this is where India needs incrementality in the relationship. So take advantage of the British Council network, catalyze that. And how can you add to that? To me, bringing in the soft capital is as important as the hard capital.
Okay, great point there. Stephen Ward, the two ideas that you would like to put on the table.
Well, firstly, the challenges are going to continue, but the opportunities are overwhelming, and I think many British companies will continue to invest for those reasons. Secondly, I think skills and development is an area, particularly for us, we need to invest in, and I think as a British company operating in India, it's a responsibility too. So that's where we're going to be focusing.
Okay, skills development, and that is, of course, one of the Prime Minister's agenda. Skill India is mission mode at this point in time. Sanjay Thakur, the ideas that you would like to put on the table to really build on this partnership.
Yeah, I mean, I think, one point for me is that, as a British Indian, the thing that I'm really, really pleased about in terms of how Prime Minister Modi's approached this is, for the first time, we're focusing on the billion people, not the 250 million upwardly mobile middle classes. And that billion creates phenomenal opportunity for British business because that billion need education, they need healthcare. That's where I think a lot of opportunities will occur for India. And I think so for the UK. The other thing that the UK, I think, will bring, which a number of people have already commented on, is the world-class capability around financial services, because you cannot invest in trillions and trillions of investment and infrastructure through savings accounts in current accounts in Indian banks. You need a highly sophisticated corporate bond market, or you need to tap foreign capital. So for me, two big messages for the UK. One is around the sophistication of financing that India needs, and secondly is don't just focus on the 250 million, focus on the billion.
Okay, that's a great point as well. Martin Sorrell, I'm going to come to you for the wrap-up comments.
Okay, so what do you want? Two ideas?
Two ideas.
Two thoughts. Well, two observations. First is, we haven't sort of raised this but yet, the future MNCs are being bred in India. I mean, often multinationals, like one that Vindy was associated with before, if you went to corporate HQ, they would say their competition was fellow multinationals, other multinationals, particularly in the West. Wrong. The real competition for the Western MNCs and multinationals are the local ones. It's that company in India that can produce the 1 rupee sachet of shampoo that has better distribution, better awareness. So that's one thing. The second thing, and this may be sort of self-centered comment, but India underbrands. Its investment in advertising and marketing services, it picks up on the DICE comment from Rana, is consistently below what we see elsewhere in the world. You know, we have a market share of 50% in India, and we have revenues of 600 million. In China, we have a 15% share, and it's 1.6 billion. So what we see in India is an unwillingness so far to make the investment in communication, which is ironic given how powerful a communicator is the Prime Minister is, Prime Minister Modi is. So I would say those two things. The future MNCs are going to come not just from India, from China and Brazil and Russia and other parts of the world, but that's really important. The second is the underbranding. India has to invest more in marketing, in the soft skills.
You're right on that front. Bindi Banga, the two suggestions that you'd like to make.
Two ideas. I think the first is focus on digital entrepreneurs. We haven't talked about that today. My personal view is Make in India is good. It will deliver a few million jobs. I think digital India, digital entrepreneurship has the capacity to create hundreds of millions of entrepreneurs. And I think that's a big opportunity which is waiting there to be reaped. I think the second is what we've been talking about a lot. The government should focus on ease of business. And I would summarize it by saying maximize approvals, Aniljeet's point, deliver on minimal government, get on with it, and make sure you have consistency on tax.
All right. Consistency on tax and improving the operating environment. Patricia, if I could ask you a specific question, and not just the two ideas, but specifically on the defense side, because there was a lot of talk, and we have now inked some sort of an agreement at the end of this visit. We've also seen some changes as far as the defense cap is concerned to 49%, now the automatic route as well. But on the offset obligations specifically, on the procurement policy specifically, do those concerns remain?
We discussed them at the CEO Forum, and indeed Amitabh Kant said on this whole issue of the offset, the change that BAE and others were calling for has in fact already been made. So it looks as if there's progress on that. I just want to make one point, Shereen. Think 2 years ago how dismal people's view of India was. Look at how much has changed. And I know from having been a government minister how hard it is to make change in government. The Modi government may not have done everything that we or it wanted it to do in the first 18 months. It has done a great deal. It's done more in the last week. It will do a great deal more over the next year. We set out in the CEO Forum a very powerful agenda. We've covered most of it in this discussion. We've got the mandate from the Prime Ministers to get on and take the action. And they have promised to listen to us when we go back to them and say, we now need you to act faster, better, simpler on these remaining issues.
All right, that's good to hear. Aniljeet Singh, your two ideas before I let you go.
No, more of the same.
More of the same? All right.
Shereen, from my perspective, two things I think. The first is goes back to Rana's point that the UK should play to its strengths, and the City of London has an enormous amount to offer in exactly the area that India needs, and that goes beyond just fundraising but legal and accountancy as well, to build the infrastructure to make Mumbai a financial centre to compete with Singapore and Hong Kong. And I think the City of London can make impressions there like no one else can. And I think from an investor's point of view, as Ocean Dial looks after investments in India for institutions around the world, India has nothing to fear. If they continue to improve the investment climate, then money will come to India and progress will be made, because investors around the world are desperate to put money into India. They just need the process to continue.
All right. And the final comments to you, Anil.
The Confederation of British Industry hugely welcomes the transformation from those dismal conversations of 2 years ago to the momentum created under the Modi government. Completely welcomes that. I think the two thoughts that I've got is British mid-sized companies have an enormous responsibility to respond to that challenge. We've talked about that. The second thought is, and we haven't talked about, is the responsibility of the Indian courts to enforce legal contracts and to give people confidence that they can have their contracts enforced quickly in the courts and obviously correctly in the courts as well. I think that's a thought we haven't discussed a lot, but there could be something in that too.
No, absolutely. That's a good point that you make. Yes, Nena, the final word to you.
So, final words, I just want to endorse that the financial engagement of the sectors, exactly as David mentioned, between the UK and India must be deepened. We need to get the structures right. We need to look at how our insurance companies, our pension companies, how our asset management companies run and how they invest in the corporate bond market. And the second is on the services side, very little in the green bond space will happen unless we can certify what is green. So we absolutely need the capabilities, the auditing, the ratings, and everything else that goes with it to make sure that we can get these skill sets established. And who better than the UK to partner with in doing this?
Well, on that note, on an enthusiastic and optimistic and confident note, thank you very much for your suggestions. Thank you very much for the ideas that you've brought to the table in terms of what both sides need to do to build on this partnership. I think finally it will boil down to execution. There is intent, there's plenty of it, there is enthusiasm, there's plenty of it, but it will finally boil down to execution at the end of the Indian government to improve the operating environment, and at the end of the UK to really get people to start to look at India in a different light and get over perhaps the past prejudice that they may have had. But appreciate you joining us here on the CNBC TV 18 special discussion. Many thanks to KPMG and to UKIBC for helping us put this together for you this morning. Thank you very, very much. Appreciate your time. With that, it's time for us to wrap up this edition of London Calling from all of us here. Goodbye. Many thanks for watching.